the year in review. It's a fine mess we find ourselves in as the year draws to a close. Our political leaders are resting on the very edge of a cliff with the remnants of a political philosophy that was rejected by most of the voters still having enough sway to run the risk that we will all be plunged over the precipice. If we're to be hurt this way, it will be an entirely self-inflicted wound. At this point, we can only pray that the leaders of Congress and the President can come to their senses sometime today or tomorrow. How did we get here? I'd like to do this morning what the newspapers, art critics, radio disc jockeys, and a lot of the rest of us do in late December: review the year that is ebbing, sift through the sands in the bottom of the hourglass to see what is significant. In one sense, it is meaningless to do a year in review. The turning of the year is about as arbitrary as the turning of the odometer on your car. If you have a bunch of zeros on your odometer, do you conduct a 50,000-mile review of the car's performance? And yet it is good to take stock, to put our heads up out of the mire from time to time to try to take a long view. Of course, the church is on a fiscal calendar, so we typically look at the year in June when we have our annual meeting. But we have a change in Congress. We have this deadline set by Congress, and the calendar year 2012 has been a big one for the town of Chatham. So I thought it was appropriate to close the year with a little retrospection. I want to proceed from the large to the small, from the cosmos to our church. Let's start with the cosmos. 2012 was a pretty big year for the universe. I don't know that there were galaxies colliding or supernovae way out in deep space, and as far as I know, it continued to expand. But I do know that some experiments here on Earth got us closer to understanding of what's out there. The Large Hadron Super Collider in Switzerland and France bashed some particles together at energies approaching that of the Big Bang. They think that one of the results was to confirm the Higgs field, this mysterious ether that is theorized to give mass to certain particles which pass through it. The cosmos may not have changed much in the last year, but we are closer to understanding it. Now, closer to home, Mars, our planetary neighbor in the solar system, got a visitor from Earth, an unmanned science laboratory named Curiosity, which successfully landed in August. This mission was a great shot in the arm for NASA and was part of the redefinition of that agency from manned space flights to unmanned explorations. According to the space agency, quote, landing was confirmed to be just 1.5 miles from the center of the targeted touchdown location, a record close on near-perfect landing precision percentage following a 350 million mile journey from Earth to Mars. Despite the fact, that's sort of like hitting the bullseye for shooting from here to Falmouth. Despite the fact that the landing took place at 1:30 a.m. Eastern Time, a crowd of about 1,500 watched it on a jumbotron in Times Square. I think it's a nice touch that Curiosity's landing site was named after science fiction writer Ray Bradbury, a tribute to the power of imagination, which can lead us into exotic worlds that sometimes turn out to be real. Maybe it's payback, because the planet Mars is often featured in science fiction as the base of a deadly alien race which will conquer Earth. May knowledge of the actual facts of Mars dispel some of that fear. But now let's come back down to Earth, at least as far as the atmosphere. The year 2012 brought record heat waves in the United States and other parts of the world. It also brought storms such as Hurricane Sandy. The heat waves and the melting of the polar ice cap are easier to connect to global warming than are the storms, which result from multiple factors. The Arctic ice cap reached a record low, and the nations of the world, meeting in Qatar, failed to agree on any significant actions to take to avert global warming. There was, however, some good news. Quote, early in 2012, the carbon dioxide emissions created by energy use in the United States dropped to their lowest level in 20 years, the U.S. Department of Energy reported. Carbon dioxide is the primary greenhouse gas. The drop was attributed to a mild winter that reduced demand for heating, a decline in the use of coal to generate electricity in favor of natural gas, which produces less carbon dioxide, and reduced gasoline demand caused by a slowed economy. All of you who bought Priuses, there's your payback. The United States is now the second largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels, having been surpassed by China. Now, closer still to home, we had Hurricane Sandy, which was actually a mix of a hurricane and a winter storm. While Cape Cod escaped the brunt of it, Sandy landed with full fury in the most populous part of the eastern seaboard, New York and New Jersey. It was a major blow. Thanks to good advance warnings and evacuations, the loss of life was quite small, 110, but the damage to property and the intricate infrastructure of the New York metropolitan region was enormous. But due to the timing, Sandy had an impact quite unlike that of any hurricane I can remember, even Katrina. It had an impact on a presidential election. The platform of one party was based on the desirability of a small federal government, and its candidate had specifically recommended downsizing the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA. The storm, coming 10 days before the election, provided a graphic demonstration that in a pinch, big government could do a credible job in saving lives and property and in rebuilding after a common disaster. The governor of New Jersey, who had been a keynote speaker at his party's convention 2 months before, now had nothing but kind words to say for the president and FEMA. Now, I'm not suggesting that in Sandy, God was actually weighing in trying to tip the presidential race. But you certainly have to give the president credit for ensuring that the federal response to the disaster was quick and competent, and that did not hurt him in the polls. Hurricane Sandy was one of the big surprises of the election season. Another was the effect of big money and super PACs. As you know, I've been advocating for a constitutional amendment to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court's Citizens United ruling of 2010, which allowed unlimited amounts of money to be spent on advertising by corporations to influence elections outside the candidate's regular campaign. There were plenty of these super PAC ads in this year's campaign, both for the national candidates and state ones as well. The money was largely on the conservative side, but there were some liberal super PACs as well. An obscene amount of money was spent in total. But the surprising story of the 2012 election is not how much money was spent, but how little those who spent it had to show for it once the votes were counted. In very few races did the barrage of super PAC advertising seem to swing the election. And I read one commentary which speculated that at a certain decibel level, the political ads cancel each other out. What was more crucial in the presidential race was the get out the vote effort. In this, the Obama campaign made great use of social media. At every campaign rally I've read, the people in the audience with cell phones were urged to text a certain message to Obama headquarters. This gave the campaign an instant database of likely voters, and they used it to good effect on election day. One commentator has said that if it was the Supreme Court's intention to aid conservatives in Citizens United, the decision was short-sighted, and that the real and decisive action was taking place inside the campaigns, which were unaffected by the ruling. Cash is needed to mount an effective get-out-the-vote operation, but that cash is raised under the old limitations, which have been in effect since the 1970s. All right, so much for the national scene. What about Unitarian Universalism in 2012? First, we lost a towering figure this year, Jack Mendelson, a man who knew the limits of liberal action but never shrunk from them. His finest hour was probably the Black Empowerment controversy in 1968, when he opened his Arlington Street church to a disaffected set of UUs from General Assembly meeting nearby in Boston. His books and his preaching have influenced many generations of UU ministers, including me. This was also the year of the Justice GA, when UUs from all around the country descended on Phoenix in June to protest the draconian Arizona immigration law. I will never forget riding from the downtown convention center in school buses out to Sheriff Joe Arpaio's tent city, where immigrants awaiting deportation were being held and attending a rally at 10 p.m. in the middle of the roadway outside the camp with 2,500 other UUs. The General Assembly also passed a resolution abrogating the doctrine of discovery, a racist legal doctrine 500 years old, which is still a part of U.S. law, and under which this country was taken from its original owners. And I preached on the doctrine when I came back, and that sermon has been studied with interest by members of the newly formed Chatham Wampanoag Circle. We have offered this group meeting space in our church. For in 2012, Chatham has been the celebration, for 2012 in Chatham has been the celebration of the 300th anniversary of the incorporation of the town. It's not 300 years since people lived here, for the Wampanoags were here long before the English settlers, and the committee steering the celebrations is aware of that fact, which is why the Wampanoag have been featured at several points in the celebration. The Chatham 300 Committee, on which sit Meeting House members Ron Nickerson and Danielle Jean-Lo, has put on a dizzying array of events from the middle of March until tomorrow night. We have all expanded our knowledge of Chatham's history and had a good time doing it. I enjoyed organizing a talk on the history of religion in Chatham, and through the Clergy Association, raising money for construction of the Labyrinth in Chase Park. Arts and history have been intertwined. Back in March, I helped put together a demonstration of 18th century dance styles, and our dancing instructor made me a period costume. I've gotten a lot of knowledge out of that. So our review of 2012 has come from the cosmos to the solar system, to the planet, to the country, to the town. What about the congregation? 2012 may be remembered as the year this congregation took charge of its future. After considering the formidable demographics, you decided that it was still worth a try to have a youth ministry, and you took Sherry Armstrong up on her offer. And many of you dug a little deeper and came up with the funding for the program. At the same time, you have recognized that many in our congregation are mobility impaired, and the building is not welcoming to them, and you have embarked on the program to install a lift. Both of these initiatives are taken out of a pledge base which has not grown significant, but has shown itself loyal and willing to support such initiatives of the church. The volunteer spirit continues to shine in the thrift shop, which had a record-breaking summer. The Finance Committee had tentatively set a revenue goal of a $1,000 increase on the thrift shop receipts, which they were reluctant to impose on our volunteer managers for fear of creating stress or a morale problem. And then the shop came through with a $2,000 increase over the previous year. Also new in 2012 is that the board has decided we need to devote some financial resources to our online presence. A new committee is working on overhauling the website. Have you seen the UUMH page on Facebook? How many of you have ever visited the UUMH page on Facebook? Good. It has reached 230 people in the last month. My sermons are posted there in written form, and many of them are also there on video. 12 of my sermons from 2012 are on YouTube, and they have collectively attracted 175 viewers. That's like 175 extra people in the pews this year. I've also posted videos of the Mandala Show and an essay on love, which is conducted on cards I held up to the camera. 2012 was also the year when the music program of this church took a great step forward with the acquisition of the Steinway piano. This is thanks to the family of Denise Bonifant Gagne in establishing a memorial fund, to Katie Peterson of Cambridge, the owner who donated it, and to the hard work of Dick Eccles and Walter Diggs to manage the details of getting it here. The piano was dedicated by 2 concerts in the summer and has added new dimensions to our Sunday worship. Our officers have been hard at work on something that is not very glamorous, but will do the church well in the long run. Figuring out a way to display our finances so that everybody can see what's going on, past, present, and future. We have learned from mistakes in the past not to count pledges paid for next year with this year's income. But as we set up separate bank accounts to deal with funds that we want to segregate, the financial picture gets complicated, and we've been working to try to simplify it. This is all in the name of transparency. During this year, 2012, I've been reminded of how interpenetrated this church is with the surrounding communities. the Summer Magic Show, the Summer Concert Series, the Thrift Shop, the Angel Fund, the Congregate House Dinner are all places where the church reaches out to the community. The board voted this month to consider the contra dance as a ministry of the church rather than a fundraiser. And last Saturday night we had 45 people from all over the Cape come in to see the Village Hall, share a potluck meal, celebrate the winter solstice, and dance the night away. Our church is strong as we head into 2012. We need to grow, of course. But if the country doesn't fall off the fiscal cliff, we will have weathered the worst of the recession without staff cuts, and in fact with a staff addition. You may pat yourself on the back, and particularly those of you in leadership. I don't want to end this review without saying something about guns. 2012 will be remembered for acts of senseless violence, even in New England, but for something more. The total depravity of the Newtown shooting has now sparked a nationwide discussion on gun control, a subject that has been off the table for a long time. After a week of silence, the National Rifle Association entered into the fray with the argument that we would all be safer if we had more guns rather than fewer, and the reaction against this argument may be intense enough to actually get some meaningful gun control legislation passed. The darkest hour is just before dawn. We have hope that our nation may be turning a corner. Though our hearts are broken at the murder of the children in Connecticut, we look now into the faces of children appearing in our own sanctuary, and we find reason for hope. Hope that 2013 will build on the advances of 2012. The hymn we're going to sing to close says, "I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find, and I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time." We are in the winter truly. Light is less, the landscape is barren, yet a beautiful snowfall has transformed it. And each day from here there will be more sun. We've discussed this morning what has happened in the world, in the country, in the town, and in the congregation in 2012. Is it too much to wish that this is the time when, as Seamus Heaney puts it, hope and history rhyme? Let's close with his advice. So hope for a great sea change on the far side of revenge. Believe that a further shore is reachable from here. Believe in miracles and cures and healing wells. Call the miracle self-healing, the utter self-revealing double take of feeling. If there's fire on the mountain, or lightning and storm, and a God speaks from the sky, that means someone is hearing the outcry and the birth cry of new life at its turn. Blessings on you all in the new year. Amen.